Welcome back to View from the West podcast. Our coaching conversation series rolls on this week as we welcome in Newman Central Catholic head coach Mike LeMay to the show. Coach, how you doing?
Doing good. Just winding down the school year. Just hoping we can get there in one piece and get ready for the summer to kick off and for another football season. It's coming around the corner, so getting really excited for that, and the kids are too. So
awesome. Yeah, you and I have texted over the years here, so you've been a loyal supporter of the show, and I think this is your first time being on. So we
yeah,
certainly appreciate that, and again, we'll have you on anytime you like.
yeah, absolutely. Can't say enough about. Just throwing that out there is, in all honesty, it's awesome to have you guys do this podcast and supporting our area and getting the coverage. It's great, and I've learned a lot about the other conferences that are covered too. You just don't realize that as much, and you guys just do a hell of a deep dive, and it's pretty awesome. So, anytime you're willing to have me on, I'm all in. It's great to be a part of it and support local football. So,
Awesome. Yeah, that's why we do it. So we appreciate that. And I've talked on this show before that you and I go back. We competed against each other, and if my math is correct, Mike, if you can believe this fall will be 20 years since our senior year. You feel
it's
old yet?
yeah, it is. It is crazy, right? It is 20 years coming up, and that makes you feel pretty old, thinking that it wasn't too long ago that you're
Yeah.
we were putting on the helmet and the shoulder pads and going out there and competing. It's crazy. I wish we could go back and do it, but
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, being on the sidelines and coaching is about as close as you can come to doing that, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's where I want to start this. We'll turn back the clock a little bit. Certainly, you're at your alma mater Newman. And I looked back at an interview that you had with our friend Dan Pearson at FCA, and you had
hmm
said that 2004 was one of the best years of your life. And I imagine that has a lot to do with being on a state championship football team. So, what was your experience like for you as a junior that year on a state championship team that brought us a title back to Newman for the first time in over a decade?
it was awesome. I think the big thing that stuck out to me is the camaraderie with all my teammates. It felt like every second that I woke up for, I don't know, really going back to June all the way up through November, it was like, man, I couldn't wait to start the day and be around the guys on the team, and just being a part of something that was bigger than yourself, and everybody felt that same way. It was kind of a crazy thing, but you'd think, like, there's some really good players on that team, and nobody got a nod for an all-state player or anything. It was just a team effort all the way, and I think it was so impactful for me to be a part of something like that. That's kind of where I'm at now. That's all I want for the game of football, is like kids to experience that, to have that moment that you can bottle up and say, "Wow, that was pretty cool." Where you really learn to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And um, you know, for me, I kind of went into that season. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't play my freshman year. I tore my ACL eighth grade season of football, and I sat out all freshman year and watched. Sophomore year, I had some pretty good success running the ball in the fullback position out of the wishbone, and played linebacker. And it kind of worked out that I kind of went right into that starting spot at linebacker, and was there from the start of the season all the way through. And it was just awesome to be in that position, and know that the coaches trusted in you, and the players, whether they're older than me or the same age, they trusted in me to make those calls and get that stuff going. And it was just one of those things where you're just so cohesive on everything. It was really cool. And that's why I say go back to it. And it was more so than playing the games, cool experience and remembering all that, but it was the stuff you did, on the weekends after the games, where you're Friday night, you're done playing, you wake up Saturday, come to film, and then you were gone all day with your buddies, just hanging out and like talking about the game, and that kind of stuff. Just it's hard to find that again. So that was it. That's
Yeah.
why it was so impressionable to me. So
Sure. Well, I went back in the archives. You had lost in week 6 that year to BV, who was, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute. They were
yeah,
in the midst of a great stretch. You lost to BV. After that defense that you were a part of only allows 36 points the rest of the season. And only 3 times that entire year, playoffs included, state championship included, that defense, an opponent only got into double digits 3 times. it was BV, and then 2 teams that finished 2-7, Mike. So I don't know what happened those 2 weeks, but those are the only 3 times that year that Newman defense allowed double digits in points.
Yeah. Well, going back to that BV team, it's pretty crazy when you lose to a team that goes undefeated and loses to Driscoll in the
Right.
state championship, a class ahead of you. And I'll tell you what, man, they ran their option attack, and I still remember those guys that were running it. You know, Preston Jones, Brad Monier. You had Coyle up front, like a huge line, and they were just so tough. And everyone remembers around this area, you had Barnes, who was a sophomore, and he was one of the wing backs and everything. But
Yep.
man, that game, it's one that we lost, but that's one probably that stands out the most. It was a mud bowl on a Friday night, and it was just back and forth, and they, hit the cutback with the fullback a couple times, and just it was tough sledding. But the worst part, and it's part of the game, but they at the end they're like said that we are the real blue machine, and snapped down, and that kind of put a sour taste in our mouth, so it was
Yeah.
one of those things that got us going to that point. But
Yeah.
yeah, the rest
Well,
of the way out, it was kind of it was an eye opener that we didn't want to have that happen again. And I always think that sometimes those losses are the best lessons, so you realize what you got to do to prepare to not have that happen again. So
yeah. Well, along that journey from that point on, week 9 was against Morrison, in
yep,
one of the muddiest games I've ever been a part of. That was on a Saturday night at Sterling, pre-turf, and
yeah,
I think they played on that Friday night, so I imagine that was one of the reasons they eventually got turf.
oh
Um,
yeah,
I think Newman won 34-0. I think Clayton Orberg ran all over us that day. The next week we would go on. We made the playoffs. We played top seed North Boone. We lost by a point. Had we would have won, we would have had a rematch with Newman
we
in
would have
round
played,
2.
yeah.
And I remember we were in North Boone, and our head coach Scott Rickles had said, "Man, I really wish we could have gotten another crack at Newman on a dry field." And look, I'm not one to shy away from competition. Would love to play Newman again, but even then, we were kind of like, it's all
Yeah,
right. You got
no,
that team was so good, and again, we were only a week behind from being obliterated from you. So
well, and that's great. It's one of those things, and at that point, 2A football, it's hard to remember, like, people that only played one side of the ball, or like two platoon. And truly, that team, you had guys that were really staying on one side of the ball. Only a couple guys went on both ways. And the big part was it didn't happen much in the trenches, where we were able to stay fresh, and that was pretty good. But yeah, I remember that you guys played North Boone, because we watched that film, and then we went up there the second week, and they ran out of the trees, and
yep.
we got after them up there, and we're able to go on to play Eastland Pearl City with Caniss, and
Was
that was a
was that the game you
quarterfinal
guys
game.
had? Was that the game you guys had 9 interceptions?
I don't think it was 9, but it was a lot. Yeah,
Okay, I was
we
there.
ran
I was
some
there.
ran some pretty good pressures. We kept 4 in the back, kind of like the Super Bowl, where the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs, down in Tampa Bay. They just played that cover 4 shell back there, and we did very similar, and had enough pressure up front with different stunts, and man, we just really caused them fits. I think
Yeah,
Jordan Edwards had 4 picks himself, so that was
yeah.
that was
It
pretty
was 7, 8, or
incredible.
9.
So
I remember that pretty
yeah,
vividly.
yeah, no, that was pretty cool. And that was one of those games where, being at Roscoe Eads, you looked around and you saw how many people were there, like up in the stands, and then, lining up on the fence line and everything.
Yep.
That was pretty neat. So it was, that's some of those games. Now you're bringing them back. Like, I can remember some of those points pretty vividly. So
Well, speaking of fans everywhere, let me bring one more back for you. As much as this will pain me, and we can just get this out of the way. Let's flash forward a year, '05, our senior
yep,
year,
yep,
Morrison and Newman. Both
at
teams ranked
Morrison.
at Morrison. Both teams ranked in the top 10 in 2A at the time. And yeah, I don't know what the fire code is at EM Bud Cole Field. I don't think anybody cared that night. There was
Yeah.
people everywhere at that game. I will remember that forever. Just
Oh,
so
I
many people.
I remember that too, and it's, again, pains you, but still remember that punt block. And
Yeah. So
yeah,
to set this up, I believe we were leading 19-6 at halftime, and
yep,
that led into like 6 minutes left in the game. You guys score, and then the ensuing possession, we go 3 and out. We punt. You block it, not you personally, unless you did. Newman blocks it, returns it for a touchdown, and you hang on for a 22-19 win.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I remember we, like, hung on too. I know, Sammy got the ball on the outside, and it was like, "Oh, man, if he gets outside because he's so
Yeah,
fast," it was
I
like
I,
it
do,
was
I
and
don't remember where we got to. We crossed the 50, and I
Yep.
don't remember where that ended. But yeah, that was. I mean, what can you tell me about you? I mean, obviously we're talking about what we remember from that game, but maybe you as a team post game celebration. What do you remember about a game like that?
Oh, it was well, one, it was like, "All right, coach." I remember Coach Nelson kinda went through, like, the whole special teams block, and it was like, yeah, I was one of the A gap blitzers. There's 2 of us, and then there was a trail guy, and I wanna say it was Tyler Reyes who blocked it. And I forget who picked it up for the touchdown, but I remember going back into the school, and it was like, man, we were just like, we felt like we got out of there with a victory somehow, and we were just going crazy celebrating. But it's such a short trip; we just wanted to get on the bus and get back to Newman, and it was one of those things that was really loud on the bus ride back. Hitting the sides of the bus and doing all that stuff, and everybody was having a good time. And just it's the essence of high school football, and
Yeah,
traveling to those places. And like you said, the crowd was electric, and it was one of those games where you just it could have gone either way. And it was, obviously being on the side of the winning side is pretty awesome, and you remember that pretty a lot. So
yeah,
it was cool though. So
yeah. I can say our reaction was not the same. Uh,
yeah,
and I,
no,
I
I get
remember
it.
that. I remember the next morning because this is what we did back in these days. You would always be getting the papers on Saturday mornings, and I can remember it. The Gazette that next day, um, the title was something like "Cardiac Comets Make
Yep.
That Second Comeback" or something. I don't know what it was. I still have it somewhere.
No,
Uh,
it's funny you say that because I think it was the week before or 2 weeks before we beat Fulton at the end. And like a lot of close games down the stretch. And one of the buddies on the team's like, "We're the cardiac comets." So it was just like, all right,
it
we're gonna
stuck.
just throw that out there. So
And I like to remind everyone. I've said this before on the show too. Like in a span of 7 weeks of my senior year, we played the defending 3A state champions
yeah.
defending 3A runner-ups and would-be state champions in Bureau Valley. We played Newman, the defending 2A state champions, and then we lost in the playoffs in the second round to Dakota, who went
Yeah.
on in 2A. So in
Yeah.
7 weeks, we went through a little bit of a gauntlet.
No, I
And
know it.
I bring that up because, still to this day, Northwest Illinois gets a lot of credit for the great football that's been played there.
Hmm.
Certainly, the NUIC gets a lot of that talk now, but I think those early 2000s, when the track was a one division Big Rivers conference, you,
Yeah.
you have Bureau Valley that had that 3 year run of two back to backs in the state championship, your title. Morrison went to the playoffs back to back years since the 90s. They went into the
Hmm.
semifinals in '06. Fulton, Amboy, St. Bede, Eureka was in the conference then, all playoff teams. So
Yeah.
that stretch of football for the Big Rivers was really, really good. And we talked about some of the players that came through. I try and keep the memory alive of that because I think that era of Big Rivers football needs to be remembered.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I you can like the rivalries run really deep there, and now they just like don't exist. It really
Right.
stinks that Newman doesn't play Morrison, or Amboy now is 8-man football, and Fulton's in the NUIC. It's just, and Bureau Valley now they're on a completely different conference. Like those were healthy things and really good players. Obviously going back, I can remember a lot of those Bureau Valley teams when I played. But the nice thing is, I can like live this through my brothers too. My brother John, he was part of a 2010 state championship team, and the Big Rivers was really good at that point. It's I don't remember many of the players on the team, but when they won that year, they played Amboy in the second round, a team they I think had a 40-point running clock on, and then that game they were down and had to squeak it out to get into the
Mhm.
quarterfinals, and that was like their closest game of the season. And my other brother, who was a sophomore there, he played in 2000. It would have been 2012 season was his senior year,
Okay.
but still playing those teams. And man, it was just excellent competition across the board.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember his name, but I can remember St. Bede, our senior year, they had a linebacker fullback. His last name was Kelly. He wore like a yellow visor. Man, that guy was a load, and he went
Yeah,
back and forth.
it's
And
kind of coming back a little bit.
yeah, but there's just tons of great players. Just great coaching across the board, and it was like you're going into every game knowing you're going to get the best shot of everybody, and it was going to be tough. So I
Yep.
mean, that was kind of wished it was back to that, but now there's so many different conference changes, and
Right.
everyone's going for the 5 wins, and trying to get to that point. That's a big part of it. So
Yeah. Well, that's all 20 years ago, Mike.
yeah,
Let's talk about last year. Okay, let's talk about the
yeah,
Newman Comets of last year.
sure.
You finished the regular season as the Three Rivers Rock champion. You
Hmm.
go to the playoffs for the third straight year in your tenure, and you get your first playoff win, first round win against Hope, and then
Hmm.
fell to a talented GCMS team in the second round. Certainly a fantastic group of seniors: Dan Kelly, Brady Williamson, Cody McBride, just to name a few. But
Hmm.
what step did your team take last year on the journey of where you want your program to go?
They took huge steps. I couldn't say enough about those guys that you just listed off as senior leadership. Two of our we had two captains last year, and Daniel Kelly and Cody McBride. And to say that not only their play was epitomized what it means to be a Newman player, but what they did off the field and just way they led stuff is exactly what we're looking for. And I think they really embraced that. A lot of our young guys that are coming up last year, we had a lot of those sophomores play, and they realize, hey, they're able to do it. They took them kind of under their wing, and that's that kind of leadership that we needed just to empower those guys. So it kind of sets us up for the immediate future and really long after that, and what they were able to do as leaders as a senior group across the board. And it's more than just those guys, obviously, that were our captains. That whole group just really bought in, and I think it's a tough thing at Newman. Forever, Coach Paposi, he so much success, and we run the wishbone, and then we changed some things up, and that's something that a lot of these guys had to adapt to. But they saw how much it worked, and they saw how that changed, made us more dynamic, and I think they really embraced it. In this last year, we were able to reap the benefits of that 100%. So it was really neat to see that they bought in, if that makes sense,
Yep.
and being able to see that. And I think they were really jacked up about that round one playoff game. And I can tell you that's the best that, since I've been coaching there in 3 years. I mean, we've been in some really big games, but that was the best overall performance from a team that I've been a head coach of. And I think those guys were completely locked in. I'd say, like, it doesn't matter who we would have played that day. I think we were, the superior team at that point. So
Mhm. Well, we'll save your the preview for this season for later in the summer. But and I don't mean to single out one player, but going into your fourth year as coach, you got to be excited to have a 3-year starter and Evan Bushman coming back.
yeah, Evan's great. He's got the demeanor of kind of like, okay. And early on, as his sophomore year, I might have been a little tough, from the quarterback position. And last year I kind of backed off, and Coach Repass, who calls our offense and everything, kind of let him take the reins on that. And I think they developed a pretty solid relationship. But Evan is just he's as consistent as it comes with what we're doing. Sometimes we're gonna make mistakes, and that's happens with everybody. But the plays that Evan makes more than he doesn't, or the mistakes he does, are definitely are much brighter, and he's shown out to be clutch when it matters. As a sophomore in his first start, just how we went down the field and beat Rock Ridge at the end of the game, and then last year being thrown in those positions, and same thing. It's just you always know, having a guy like that now with all that experience coming into it, you're never going to be out of it, and he's going to lead it the right way, where everyone knows, like, man, he's got a lot of reps underneath his belt. He's taken a lot of hits. He's been through the ups and downs, but it's a guy that I think is going to be, the leader in that position 100%. So
Great. Well, you've been to the playoffs all 3 years so far. Lost in the first round of first 2 years before, like we said, getting that win against Hope last year. This is a program coach that hasn't missed the playoffs since 2000.
yeah,
Is that the type of pressure that you want on your shoulders to drive the success?
yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think the big part is just kind of an expectation. Um, I I know that was kind of one of those things that we didn't really think about making the playoffs. If that makes sense, it was taking every game and just take it literally game by game. I know it's super cliche, but it really was just that, and it's something that I learned. It was it's not about what's on the scoreboard. It's how hard did you work, and if you put forth your best step, you're going to be in pretty good position, and that's what we demand out of the kids. I think that's something that they've learned at a young age when they come in as sixth graders to play junior tackle, all the way up to when they're senior year. It's just take care of the little things, do it the right way, and those things take care of themselves. You'll be playoff eligible because you'll get those wins, whether they come easy or they come hard. No win does come easy. There's a lot of prep that comes into it, but I certainly like the pressure of it. I'm one of those people that I don't know. I like to kind of be in those situations, whether it's, I'm going out to play a round of golf and I'm in a scramble and they need to make a putt or something like that. It's just, it's fun to be in those positions. And I think that when the lights are on and letting kids know that you're going to back them and they're about, in that position, the pressure kind of gets to them. And they realize they don't want to be the team that doesn't achieve that. And I think they put that on themselves. It's nothing I do. But I think it's just part of the tradition at Newman that's kind of built on itself. But it's just expected, I guess. And I don't know, I kind of like it. So it's just
Yeah.
back there in the back of the head, but nothing crazy. So
Yeah. Well, you say it's a cliche answer to go 1 week at a time, but that's something that Rick Aaron at Lena Winslow has always told us when we've asked him the same question. He's been doing the 1A state champion 5 years in a row, and
yeah.
asking him how he keeps his kids in line, not looking ahead. That's the exact thing that he says. So it may sound simple. I know it's not, but it seems to be a proven approach.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I always think about it too, is these moments, and out of all sports, our sport in football, you're only guaranteed that 9 games.
Mhm.
So you have to make the best of those 4 quarters on that given night, and relish in those experiences. And it's pretty limited on when a kid gets on the field. They might not be a starter and everything. So you want to maximize that potential for every kid to reach that. And that's how I approach, every practice, prepping for a week is the same. Like, let's give your best effort every single every single snap, everything that you do, so you get a chance to show out. I mean, again, you don't get that many opportunities, so that's what makes it fun about football is the little bits, and hopefully they see that and it pays big dividends. So
Yeah. Well, success has certainly followed you at every step, including your stint right out of college with Rock Island Allman, finishing second in 4A back in 2010. I believe a short return to Newman before you went to Sterling. Is
yep,
that right? Okay.
1 year, 2011. Yep,
Okay.
we lost to Morrison in the quarterfinals. So
Okay.
yeah.
I think that might have been their state championship year, I
It
think.
was. It
Okay.
was. That was one of those games where it was like, man, the winner of this feel pretty good about going down
Sure.
and winning state. But yeah, that was that game.
So
So
Alderman, Newman, and then you're at Sterling for a long run as their defensive coordinator. What were
yep.
some lessons that you learned at maybe all three of those stops, or things that you learned early in your coaching career?
Yeah, yeah. Starting with Allman right out of the gate, it was pretty cool to be at Ambrose still and kind of doing the student teaching. Allman was really close. I went over there and man, the coaches there just embraced me. And it was like the more I kept going, they kept giving me more and more and more. And I think that's really what intrigued me a lot is that, maybe the experiences I've had really do matter, and the relationships I'm building with those kids at that time really do matter. That they see the value in my position. Like Coach DeJagger there was an awesome guy. I mean, I can't say more about him and what he was able to provide with me. And then Coach DePorter was the defensive coordinator when I was there, and he was awesome. Just really good with film breakdown and learning a lot. And I taught in the classroom with Nate Scahill, and not only just learned a lot from him teaching, but the coaching side of it. He had a great eye for the game, and I just saw Coach Lee, who is he's the track coach at a track meet just the other day, and I see these guys all the time when I go to the Quad Cities, or I see Coach DePorter, and we talk about those, and they ask about my family, and I just it's like, yeah, I was there for a short stint, but I felt like I'd known those guys forever, and that was kind of that family sense that I had growing up at Newman. So it was probably the perfect fit that first year. And man, to I don't know, luck into it and being a part of a runner up team, it was awesome. I mean, so many great players on that team and great experience, but learned a lot from those guys on, preparation and just just how to like I guess get my get my nose in on the on coaching on both sides. And I felt like the point that they let me kind of do my thing, and they trusted in that, made me feel as now as a head coach, you got all these guys that are assistants that are capable. They just need to know, what's the goal or what do you want to accomplish, and then kind of letting them run with it and empowering them. That's the best thing, and that's what Allman provided. And you go to Newman that next year, and I'm right back with the same coaches I played for, which is pretty sweet. And on top of it, my youngest brother, he was a junior that year, so I got really close with that group and knew all his buddies, and they grew up like watching us and everything. So it was really neat going back to that. But I got to see the other side of like Coach Paposi and his staff, not so much as a player taking it, but sitting in the coaching meetings with them, listening to when we're sitting in the coach's locker room and talking about after practice what that's like, and just how to handle those things. And I think it really stuck with me the lessons that are more than the game of football and what you're really trying to accomplish. And I think it's easy to recognize that now, being 37 or later in your life, that those really were impactful as a football player and just a student athlete at Newman. But when you're at that coaching position, man, it's a lot. And knowing that everything you do, everything you say, and trying to get them to understand their role and empowering them it was really crucial. I know Coach Paposi, he wears his emotions on his sleeves. He's always been that way, and I know that's rubbed off on me, and that's who I am too. I couldn't say more than enough about him as a coach to me as a player, and then a superior coach or somebody that I learned a lot from, and it was fantastic. So it really, in 2 years back to back, a lot of success that I was a part of a coaching staff. And then it just, yeah, I talked to John, who's oddly enough known his family my entire life. My mom and his mom were sorority sisters down at Eastern.
Oh, how about that?
Um, yeah, so we kind of grew up with the Schlemmers, and actually, the year we won state, Coach Schlemmer, the elder Coach Schlemmer, Bob Schlemmer is John's dad. He was up here teaching at Sterling, and he came over and he'd have dinner with us, and he'd be around, and he was great. He was at Sterling, I was at Newman. We'd talk back and forth about football and just kind of where everybody's at. And I had some really good experiences with John's dad, and thought the world of him, and just talking about all that stuff. And then finally getting to work with John, it was a friend of mine. A little different, where it's like, hey, you had Coach DeJagger, you had Coach Paposi, older guys, but John is one of my great friends, and putting me in that position to and trusting me to run his defense was pretty awesome. Early on, he was kind of feeling his way, and then of course the autonomy he gave me on that side of the ball was awesome. I couldn't say enough more about him, and I learned a lot of the organization of football from John. Just a lot of those things that come along with it. And the whole staff, all those guys, still I try to stay in contact with everybody as much as I can, and just seeing them around town and everything, and just really good memories that I'll never forget, and learned so much from them over those 10 years. I couldn't say enough. It's just some of the best times. I know I mentioned 2004, but as it goes for coaching, those years, it's hard to beat some of those years and those experiences for sure. So
Yeah. Well, you touched on it a little bit, and I want to get back to your Newman roots and Coach Posi. Sterling Newman, certainly one of the most, if not the most, tradition-rich programs that we cover. Um, you talked about it. You played under the legendary and coached with Michael Posi, a five-time state champion, over 300 coaching wins, Hall of Famer. you touched on this a little bit, but how did he shape you as an individual, maybe on the field and maybe more importantly off the field?
Well, on the field, certainly, he demanded a lot. It's one of those things like, we all from our family background, and a lot of who we are is our family. In my family, that was something that was important to me, is to make sure I was a person of high character. But that's something that Coach Paposi reiterated. The best that you can be, and it really taking those steps of being a great man. And I think he embodied that, the way he treated his family, the way he always had them around, the way he talked about his family openly. And I think those are the things that, as a player, you see that at the age of, like, 16, 17. And you realize, oh man, I want to be like this guy. I want to be like this man when I get older. A man of faith, all that stuff that was really important. So playing for him, I felt like I didn't want to mess up. I felt like he was almost that father figure where you're like, I want to do right. I want to make sure he understands that I'm going to hold myself to that standard, and by doing that, it's going to hopefully make everybody else around me better, um, to the level that it's bigger than myself. And certainly, once you get in the coaching room, you realize that that truly is the message, and that's the tradition of Newman, is trying to get people to come through that program. And if you're a part of it, you come on the backside of it a better person, a better man out of that program. And that's something that I'll forever make sure that happens at Newman. It's not going to change. And those traditions and those bonds are cemented. You hope that people realize that your actions do mean a lot, and what you do all the time. And that's really important. So again, I can't begin to tell you where, Coach Paposi falls in my life as not only just a football coach, but truly a role model, somebody that I've always looked up to. So
Yeah, well, let me tell you this from a personal standpoint. I've met Coach. I had met him off the field. I think before our junior year, something like that. Um, and then I'll always remember we were doing a 7-on-7 at Newman, and we were playing Rochelle or Dixon or something. And Coach Posey was doing chain gang of all things, always
yeah,
being on the field helping out. And I had made a play. I broke up a pass or something right in front of him, and like immediately he was congratulatory. And not only that, knowing that I was at a rival school, giving me a tip on how to break a little earlier and intercept a pass right then and there. And
yeah,
I could not believe that he was telling me this. And enough so, I think after that '04 game, like there was 3 or 4 of us that were on the field having just gotten blown out by him. We wanted to make sure we gave him the time and congratulate him on the win and wished him good luck.
yeah,
So, even as an
yeah,
opposing player, he's such a big personality, and it's such a respectable guy that we gave it to him because he gave it to us right back.
yeah. No, 100%. That's him to a T. I'm glad that he demanded all that he did, in that time. But gosh, the respect I have for him, and I love that you say that, because that truly is who he is. Sometimes you just can't turn off the coaching,
Yeah.
and it's always one of those things where he sees stuff, and he's seen a lot of it. So it's that point where it's, man, coming from him, and the willingness to go ahead and say something to maybe help out somebody else is, embodies who he is 100%. So
Yeah. So one thing I've always wondered, and this is true, um, and you mentioned that I read an article that when you got hired, that the Newman tradition was always going to be a big pillar of everything that you do. What I've always been curious about is how did whether it's Coach Posey or other coaches or the community, how do they instill that blue machine mentality to a freshman, somebody younger? How do they get those young players to buy into the Newman mindset? What happened to you as a player, and what's your take on that? How do you do that now?
yeah, I mean, the deal is like it goes back before you're a freshman. When we started playing junior tackle football in fifth grade, you were wearing the jerseys that said Blue Machine. We had white helmets, so they weren't the blue ones, but you practice right up the hill from the high school practice. So
Mhm.
you're going to get water, and it's like you're seeing all these high school players that you like idolized,
Right.
and just the way they learned it from Coach Raposi and how much they invested in us, and the way they treated us. They weren't malicious, they were uplifting, they came around, they always had good things to say. And Coach Manzano's run the middle school program forever, the junior tackle. And he's been exactly like Coach Raposi at the early stages, and it's just instilled. And then when you come in as somebody, like we had people that come in as a freshman from different programs or whatever it might be, and you just it's contagious right away. It's like one of those things where you have to do it, otherwise you're not going to fit the mold of it. And it is so like it's so culture rich that it just builds on itself. And I think everyone just buys in. You realize the success of it. And it's even this year or the last 2 years, it's what's it mean to be a part of the Blue Machine. And you realize it's not what you do on the like X's and O's. It's way more than that. It's the way you carry yourself and the little things that you do and how you play for one another and all those things. And that's the little aspects that have been brought in. And I can promise, like you said, it's not all Coach Raposi. A lot of it is, but he brought on a lot of that stuff from other people. And there's other coaches that coached with him over his tenure that brought in some really neat parts of that tradition to help embody that. But the mission has always been, to do it together and being selfless. And I think you learn that at a really early age, and you don't worry about winning and losing, and you worry about just doing the little things right and being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. So
Hmm.
that's what makes it neat. So
Sure. Now, kind of going through that, was that what maybe steered you towards being a teacher and a coach, or was that maybe something that you always wanted to do?
I honestly, I didn't know. My dad's a doctor. I wanted to be like my dad. I kind of thought about, hey, maybe this would be cool to study medicine and be a doctor like that. Um, my grandpa on my mom's side, he played football. At Northern. He played quarterback there, and his son, my uncle, went into coaching, and he got all the way up in the NFL, and he was offensive coordinator for the Titans, the Broncos, the Jets. Bounced around a lot, but he worked under Mike Shanahan, and he worked under Jeff Fisher and all these guys. And we get to go watch games. We always watch that. So football's always been there. Like growing up around it, like we're very much a football family. And the more I watched it and the more I just kind of digested that, the more I realized, man, this is really what I want to do. Like I really enjoy the X's and O's, the strategy. I really enjoy the camaraderie that football brings. Just like all the little ins and outs that it does, the life lessons. And, as I went through as a player for Coach Raposi, I think that just solidified it. And by the time I was out, I realized I want to keep playing, go to St. Ambrose, and I play and being a part of another team where I got to be around some of my great buddies that I'm still, talking to all the time, and having great coaches that influenced me there. And realize, maybe I want to just study education and I want to get into coaching. And I'm a big time history nerd. I love love history. So I got into history education, and that's the rest is history. I think it's just all that just constantly on the side of what I wanted to do. So
Yeah, great. Um, so you're in this long stretch of being at Sterling, and Brandon Kressmer leaves his post as Newman head coach. And I read that you maybe weren't necessarily maybe not thinking about applying because things were so good for you at Sterling, and it maybe took some convincing for you to apply for the Newman job. Can you run us through that process? Did you ever think you would coach at your alma mater? Was it ever a goal?
I mean, I think so. I mean, being back in the area, there's a little bit of that. It went back and forth even earlier on. About I don't know, maybe halfway through the time I was at Sterling. Coach Raposi was kind of talking about retirement and all that stuff, and there was some thought thrown out to it. I just wasn't at that point. I did want to. I love being defensive coordinator, and I loved every second and every moment of my time at Sterling. I couldn't I couldn't tell you better things about what that program did for me and being a part of it. But I think I always wanted to, run a program myself. John knew that, and it wasn't something I talked about all the time actively with him, but he knew, and he was very supportive of that. And when this came open this time around, I think it was just that time where it was like, hey, I've been here. It's time to go ahead and go through that process yourself. And Johnson, he's not going anywhere. And I'd love to be at Sterling and all that stuff, but it's right here. It's something that is in my community. It's a place I was a part of, and it worked out, really well at that time. And I'm glad it did. I think everything kind of aligned at that point where I had plenty of experience being as a coordinator role and assistant coach, and I was ready to kind of get my feet wet and jump in. And I'm glad I did. And everyone's been supportive in knowing that that's what I wanted to do, whether it was people at Sterling or people at Newman. But I don't know, when it came around to it, it was kind of back and forth because I again, it's hard to leave a position that you felt valued at so much and that you really built good relationships with. And and it wasn't just on the coaching standpoint, the people I taught with in that building and everything. So it was difficult, but I think it all worked out the way it was meant to work out. And being in this position, I'm pretty happy and pleased with everything, and I'm looking forward to a lot of hopefully great success and keeping things rolling. So
Well, you could have said it was just a great sales pitch from your AD Justin Stevenson. I would have believed that.
yeah, yeah. Well, he certainly he said some things, but yeah, it was just that moment, I guess. It was exciting, and it was nervousness all at the same time, but it was worked out being the right thing. So
Yeah. But you touched on this a little bit when we were talking about your current roster, and I like asking this question. We asked it to Farmington coach Toby Vallis on the last episode. I'm particularly interested in your answer here. Again, with so much tradition at Newman, classic wishbone offense. But you're a coach in 2025. How do you inject new life into that to modernize your coaching, but without losing your identity?
yeah, it's hard, and trust me, I've heard it every which way. There's a lot of people that are like, "This is pretty sweet, really like seeing this," and there's a lot of people that are not fans because it's just different from what traditionally is there. I look at it as I'm a big believer in you have to kind of assess your personnel and what's best for your personnel. Um, Not to say that you could run wishbone every game and every play, and it works for that reason. It's been super successful. Clearly, the proof is in the pudding, right? And there's not much to change. I ran it as a player. I know the offense and the way to do that. And if I needed any support or any help, there's coaches that are right there, like literally right next door to the football field, practice field, to come over and help do that. And it's great to have that resource. It's just one of those things, as I've had the experience of being at different spots, you realize, man, this looks pretty good, or that's hard to defend. And I think that's kind of more of my perspective is 10 years of prepping defense. I think about teams that we went against and thinking about what they were able to do, and being multiple is really, really tough to prepare for in a week's time. And if that's something that we can ingrain early on, I think that's huge. But obviously, the basis is still, going back to what Newman is. It's tough, hard nosed football, and this is not a finesse game, and it's not going to be at Newman. It just looks a little different in what we're trying to do, and utilizing athletes out in space is a big part of what the game has evolved to. But having a perfect blend is what you're trying to always get to. Shoot, you can see the way people do it in college football all the way up to the NFL. I mean, it's still very relevant to pack the box and get after people. I know as a defensive coordinator, man, there's times where we went against people and you couldn't stop them, and it is demoralizing. And it is one of those things that it's perfect for the wishbone when it's humming and you can stay in it. Man, that is a demoralizing thing. But if someone's got the answer for it, you just can't match pound for pound or body for body. You got to be able to go to the next step, and that's something that thankfully it's worked out. In these 3 years, and we've been able to evolve and get to that point. And I think now it's become a lot more well versed for the kids and making that change. And and whatnot. They still, trust me, they still know the wishbone like the back of their hand. So it's very much alive, and it is really good, and it works really well. So
Oh, that's as God intended there, Mike.
yeah.
Um, well, and certainly I know your answer will include Coach Poposi, but where do you find coaching influences or for ideas of inflecting some new plays? Like if you're watching college film or NFL film, where are some influences that you're pulling from?
Yeah, that's a it's a great question. I mean, the resources now, I would even you would never even think about it 10 years ago or even before that. Like just the stuff that's on X and
Yep,
like the Dan Casey playbooks and all that stuff. You see it all
that's a
the
great
time.
reference.
And it's like, well, shoot, we run that formation, but you're trying to think like, oh man, that play looks really nice. It's something like and you see this all the time too, the influences of going to clinics and listening to people. I just heard a guy talk about time is money, and do you want to do it cheap, or you want it to be expensive about the amount of time that you spend? And you start to realize, yeah, it looks really sweet what you see, but I don't think we can go ahead and spend that amount of time because we just won't execute it to that level.
Right.
So I don't know. I've seen a lot of stuff out there. I love watching the college game, and just kind of the different options that are built off of an offensive play. And that's something that I've seen a lot of people run. I see your pennant behind you, big Notre Dame fan as well. Love what they've been doing. I love that it's very much a run heavy offense, ground and pound. It just looks a little different. Love when people start running the quarterback a lot. It just makes it tough to defend. And those are some of the things that I look at. And I think, Marcus Freeman, although a defensive minded guy, certainly on the defensive side, looking at what he's done and that influence, I always look at like a guy like Nick Saban, and more so not for the play calling because he's had so many different play callers that were successful, but more so that the little messages here and there, and that are really extensions of what Coach Poposi was all about, and just building good character and the belief in that. Because really, what it comes down to is it doesn't matter what you run if the kids believe it, man, it's going to be pretty successful. So, but across the board, there's so much out there. I mean, even in IHSA, northwestern part of the state, you watch people run certain stuff and you see it on film, and you're like, dang, that's pretty good. Like, gosh, it goes back to like this year. Coach Pearson at Princeton, we played them week one, and they ran a belly sweep play that was just really, really good. They hadn't shown it at all last year, and you're prepping for them, and they put that in, and they got us on it enough times where our eyes just got lost defensively, and it reminded me of playing Moline out of the wing tee, and they ran the same thing where they pull the guard around and they run it really well. And I was like, dang, we could go ahead and adapt that. It'd be something that we can do out of bone that's split, or we can do it out of gun. And we ran that a few times, and against Hope, we scored twice on it. So, I mean, that's just the little things that you look at and ways to match what your verbiage is and what the kids know, and making it something that fits your scheme, I guess. So,
Yep. No, it's great. Just a few final questions for you, Mike. Have a little fun with some of these.
okay.
I want to know your favorite pregame ritual or superstition, both maybe as when you were a player or now as a coach.
Oh man. Player wise in high school, I can remember senior in front of me. It was always game day. Charlie McGinn, his dad was our defensive line coach. But they collected like old school cars. Like literally, if you watch the movie Dazed and Confused, they had all those cars. So like he would rotate what the car was, and he'd pick me up on the way to school, and we kind of drive around early in the morning listening to Allison Chains, kind of getting pumped up for game day. We always went to Subway, and they'd give us extra cookies, so that was kind of like our thing after school. I can remember that, but a lot of it was like the same music you listen to. That was kind of the pregame ritual. And now as a coach, it's some of that stuff's the same. I like think about what socks I'm wearing, stuff like that. And or this is something I don't know, it might be it's just something I do. It's the day before, and it's our walkthrough. I always wear the opposing team's colors, to school. I wear it out to practice. I don't know. It's just always something I just started doing. And some of the kids would be like, "Why the hell are you wearing, that color of that team?" I'm like, "See, you're thinking about them. I just want you, having that conversation of why is coach wearing that and doing that stuff."
Yeah.
But it's just little stuff like that. It's kind of fun, looking at it. And some things there's some things I do that are kind of consistent, but most of it's not the same as when you're a player, as a coach as much. So
Yeah. I mean, all the talk now is NIL deals, but those free Subway cookies, don't sleep on that benefit.
no, that was pretty big. They knew we were coming in on Friday. So
You introduced an alternate helmet. I think that was 2 years ago.
yes,
It
correct.
was the Comet script helmet. I'm
Hmm.
curious how that went over with the brass, being the tradition rich program that you are, and wondering if we'll see something new this year or in the future.
It's a good question because there's some things
You
coming up this year.
don't spoil anything. That's all I need to know. A little teaser is
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. There's you'll see some new stuff this year. We'll see how it goes over with some people, but I know our players are pretty darn excited about it. It's created a lot of buzz. We just met the other day about it, and they're talking about it at school. It's a month away from when we start June stuff, and the kids are amped up about it. But the Comet script logo actually it is pretty neat, and I think it was went over well. Now it's being used on a lot of our apparel, which is great. It's kind of been coming back, and a lot of people are buying it. But there's a plaque right outside Coach Accardi's office, and it was one of the trainers prior to him. I don't know why I can't remember off the top of my head, but one of the players he was working on had the old script on his helmet, and we used to wear that before the NC was around, and now the NC with the cross. And I, went back and looked historically, and of course, 1990 was the first state championship, and they wore the Comet script on the side. So I was like, man, let's throw it back to that, and bust that out. And I think there were a lot of alumni that were pretty pumped up about it. Coach Maposi, we actually brought him down to our team meeting when we unveiled like we're giving all the kids the decals that Thursday. We made a hype video, and Coach was sitting back there, and he's like, "Oh, the old whale tail, this is awesome." So he was pretty fired up, and it turned out being received well. And matter of fact, the kids didn't want to go back to the NCs. I thought it was just going to be like, oh, maybe we'll change the decal, slap them back on. They're like, "Hey, coach, can we just stay with the Comets one?" I'm like, "Sure." And now the kids are asking about it, like, which decals are we going to have this year? So it's pretty cool to have the option, and it's
Yeah.
something that's little, but it creates a buzz and gets everybody excited about it. So
Yeah. Well, Morrison went away with the winged helmet, and
yeah,
I'm never going to get over that.
I know that was a shocker to me too. I was like,
I,
whoa.
yeah. And next time I see Coach Vandermite, I gotta get to the
Yeah,
bottom of
you got to let them know, man. Let them
it.
know this is just
I
yeah,
tried. I tried.
yeah.
All right. Final question for you, and you touched on it a minute ago. Our boys in the blue and gold. We are mutual fans of Notre Dame Fighting Irish, coming off national championship appearance, losing some key players, and some new DC coming in there. I'll set the over under at 10. You're going to go under, over. You're going to push that on the win total this year.
I'm going over. They
Okay.
got they got it going. I can't say enough about the type of personality Coach Freeman has. I mean, it's infectious. I think everybody that's there and part of that, it's one of those things like, man, I want to play for that guy, and he's very calm and collected, and I think that goes over really well. And I mean, obviously, I'm pretty optimistic on stuff, but I'd rather be on that side. I think the Irish are going to have a great season again. I hope it's the same as if it was this last year, but if not better, So
Yeah. We just need to win one more. That's all we need. Just
I
one
know
more.
it was pretty cool. I got to go down to that Orange Bowl game, and
Okay.
it was awesome. And man, I one of the coolest experiences ever being down there and watching that game. And you just, I always thought like, oh man, we've been in these games so many times, we're gonna lose, we're just gonna lose, and it felt
Yep.
like it. And then it was like the way it turned around, it was pretty cool. So I think it's happened now. Everyone's kind of believing you can win that big game, and I see it over 10 for sure. So
I love the optimism there.
Yeah.
Well, hey, look, Coach, thanks for joining us. Happy to have you on the show, and again, appreciate the support that you've had for us over the years, and looking forward to continuing that. Year 4 for you starts pretty soon, really,
Yeah.
and that all leads up to a opening week game against Princeton once again, August
Mhm.
29th. So, Coach, we'll talk to you again before the season starts.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and keep doing what you're doing. I love listening to you guys, and it's fun to hear about how everybody else is doing. And we got a good thing up here in Northwest state of Illinois, and yeah, I'm excited for 2025 edition of football around here. So,
All right, awesome. Thanks, Coach.
yep.